Hi, welcome to Digital Davos. We have here Lisa Christine, and welcome to Davos. We met yesterday and we saw your work, and I thought it's incredible. Work which you do, photographic, and also as Chamberlax, our company is involved in supply chain and is involved with Africa to establish a more ESG compliant um, supply chain, and especially we were focusing in several projects in human slavery, child labor, and all the surrounding exploitation of humans, which takes place, and we are not aware in the world. And you show me the really sad but wonderful photos and your work which you do. And so for this, I'm glad to have you. And if you could a little bit present yourself and for who you do the work, and we go ahead from there.
Well, I've been photographing for over 40 years in more than 150 countries, and I've done so initially with really wanting to inspire unity around people and dignity. The idea that instead of being afraid of one another's differences, instead we could be curious or in awe and how that might change relationships. But about 16 or 18 years ago, the notion of modern day slavery was brought to my attention. And while back then I knew there was some trafficking, I assumed it was in very small numbers, and I also assumed it was only sex trafficking. But when I learned that, there were some 27 million people enslaved, now that number today is 50 million, it thwarted me off on a new trajectory in my work. And I started documenting in many of the same places I'd been around the world, but this time from a very different angle. And the premise behind it is really believing that a photograph can be transcend language, right? It is visceral. And so when a person has the opportunity to stand in front of an image of a person who's photographed, no matter how horrific the circumstance, what I'm interested in is their dignity, then perhaps the viewer has an opportunity to connect with them and want to make a difference, offer help.
Thank you. And this was especially your photos are like artworks, and there is a pain in the photography, but it could be some critics saying that by making it so aesthetically, the photography, that it would romanticize the misery of people. What would you say to this?
There's so much journalistic work in the world that is showing us what is horrific. I think that's already been done. But how I see things and how I see people it's innately to me. I'm looking for balance and color, but it's in the background. And I'm looking for that person's dignity. So I agree with you that the images they do have a beautiful aesthetic, and it's been commented on a lot. But let's look at that as an opportunity to be able to engage with it in a way that isn't alarming and drawing a sort of depression, but perhaps it allows us to sort of allow ourselves to look more deeply into what is actually occurring. Because I see people stand in front of an image sometimes, and I can literally see the turn in the brain, how they're absorbing the image and hopefully the empathy of the person in the image, and then are brought to a place where they say, wow, I want to do something. I want to help. This is happening to somebody. That's kind of my idea around it.
So, as I saw your photos, exactly with dignity, and please correct me if I'm right or wrong, I think basically these people in slavery, they were exploited. Everything was taken for them. They don't own themselves anymore. And by making a photo which is aesthetic and you're giving them dignity back, you gave them a little bit of humanity back. Is it like you see it?
Yes, for sure. I mean, they already have that dignity, but it's just really focusing on that And more than anything, it's really giving them a platform to tell their story, if you will, to millions of viewers around the world. And that's to me, when I share my work here in Davos, and we had the exhibition at the Kirchner Museum, I said, this isn't just me here. These aren't just images here. These are all the people that are in this circumstance that are asking you to listen to their stories and to do something. So I hope it really comes through that way.
So you had here an exhibition in Davos, and this museum is dedicated to the painters, which were one specific painter, which was from the Purka, and these painters were, which were members of the Purka in Germany, were prosecuted by the Third Reich. So when for their art, which was a little bit not conform, uh, do you see there that you hold the spirit from the Purka in your photographies?
Goodness, I didn't actually know the history, to be honest, because this has all happened so swiftly. But I'd like to think that those of us who tell the truth and it upsets people, well, so be it. You have to tell the truth. What other point is there?
Thank you. So you were traveling all over the world and with your pictures. Can you tell us basically a little bit about the nations which you visit and basically where did you find it? And let's start it with a question. Where did you find human trafficking where we don't expect to find it? Because we all know where we would expect it, but where did you find it where we wouldn't have expected it?
The interesting thing is that slavery is actually illegal in pretty much every country in the world, but it exists in every country in the world. And the unique thing about it is that it often is hidden in plain sight. There are some things where you can think, oh, that person looks so horribly treated and it's a dire circumstance, and that may be obvious. But it could be a server in a restaurant. It could be a person at a petrol station. It could be the person that is making the bricks that your building is built in. There's so many parts of the supply chain of virtually everything that we can find slavery. And it's certainly right here in Davos. I'm sure it's within like 100 meters of us. It's just very prevalent. And I think that I want to get people to start asking the question, are things as they appear? Because sometimes they're just not.
So, tell us a little bit about the countries which you visited to collect the art and over which span you were doing this art.
Well, my overall arc of work has been for 40 years, but on the work distinctly on human trafficking and modern day slavery, it's been about 16 or 18 years. And I've gone to many different countries around the world, most of which I'd already been to. And I've done work, for example, in gold mines in Ghana and platinum mines and other gold mines in South Africa and mica mines in India. But I've also done a lot of work on sex trafficking in brothels in India and in the continent of Africa, as well as the United States and Europe. But there's bricks that are prevalent in a lot of countries around Bangladesh and India and Nepal. But I find it very interesting when we go into Western cultures to really look at where it exists there, because it could exist in domestic servitude or certainly sex trafficking, but it could be in agriculture or it could be in hospitality. So it's really interesting in all these countries.
Thank you. So, during your work, you, of course, have had resistance. Not everyone is happy when you document it. What can you share some experience which you had problems with documentation or something like this?
Well, when I did this work, as you have just said, it's not that people want me to photograph these illicit activities. So I was always working with abolitionists that were working undercover, and they would bring me in at very distinct periods of time for short durations. It could be like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And there would be several people that would be on the parameter of where I was, and then somebody very close to me, because when I work, I'm utterly immersed and very unaware of my surroundings. Um, and when, like if I was at a brick kiln and somebody was coming in, they would quickly tap me on the shoulder and we would have to run. It's funny, most of my work is made with a 19th century built camera, a view camera 4 by 5 or a medium format. But this body of work, I always use a small 35 millimeter in order to be agile, or if I have to run like a bat out of hell, right? Um, but there are dangerous circumstances. I mean, certainly in gold mines, I've had to hide inside the mines when security carrying AK-47s learned there was a, photographer around. And even in my own country, I was documenting sex slavery in Washington, D.C. at the foot of the embassies, actually. And I got in a big mess with some of the traffickers there. Unfortunately, I was able to get out of it, but nobody wants this to be seen. But I felt like since it was so unknown to the general public, I mean, when I started this work, um, foundations couldn't even get funding because people didn't believe it existed. And now people know. And I think part of that's because they see it, and that's what a photograph allows for.
What political changes, the most important one, when you would say one thing you could change miraculously, one thing. You can speak with the president for the United States and he says, I grant you one wish, one law, just rewrite it, one thing, one regulation, just redo it. And what would you think would be the most efficient one to combat like human trafficking?
I think the main thing would be that there's accountability, both for the traffickers, um, and in some cases, like within sex trafficking, the buyers, because then it would very quickly stop. What often happens is, for example, with people on the move, when somebody's trafficked, they are moved to a new place. So then they become illegal aliens, and often the traffickers will confiscate their passports and hold them under threat of violence. So, just as an example, maybe they're arrested somewhere and they're in a foreign city. They're treated not as a victim, but rather as an illegal immigrant, for example. Or with sex trafficking, somebody is treated as a prostitute when it's illegal and thrown in jail when the trafficker goes free and just goes and grabs other women. I think I would ask for more accountability. And I want to say one last thing, because in the last year or so, I've been partnering with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And this is really big because, as you know, they're a tech company and they are so daring, looking into the supply chain of technology and drawing data and not only doing known audits on themselves, but others and training and surprise audits. And I think that the gathering of that data, along with governmental data and NGOs, organizations data, we would have a much greater ability to see what actually is happening and kind of follow that to have a means to an end to really do something.
You heard about the new president in the United States, President Trump. We heard his opinion about border and border control and immigration. Do you think it will reduce, increase, or make it more dangerous, or help to fight human trafficking? So, what is your stance on this new proposed regulations? Not what is right now happening, but where he sees to go.
Wow, our new president. That's a lot. If you think about the global situation of slavery, of which there's 50 million people, The West is the biggest, or America is the biggest consumer of that, but that's kind of through products and things like our purchasing. But being that it's an international problem, I don't know that the wall itself stopping it is going to make a huge dent, because traffickers are cunning. They're going to figure out ways to get people over the border, whether it's on a flight or using somebody's real passport because the person is being brought under a false promise of a job. And then once they arrive to the destination of USA, then they're abused, you know? So I probably don't have an entirely strong knowledge to answer that question accurately, but I don't know it's going to make a huge dent globally. It has to be more than that.
Yeah, and you're correct because sadly for traffickers, this is just a merchandise, not a human.
Yes.
And it's expensive merchandise. So they have the means to transport them. It's more other immigrants which probably will have face problems. Is this your opinion?
What do you mean other immigrants?
Like illegal workers which come from the free will and are not held in human trafficking conditions.
I think anyone that is more vulnerable, so as an example, if they're illegal immigrants, and they're looking for work, they're they're much more likely to be exploited because when anybody's in a vulnerable situation and somebody arrives to them to offer them a job or an education, most people will say yes. And often, you know, these traffickers, they're very good liars. They're very cunning, and yeah, I think they're more vulnerable for sure.
Just two questions to wrap it up. The first question is where you go next to photograph and what you want to photograph.
Oh gosh, I'm coming off a big trip from Dubai to Abu Dhabi to Turkey to Davos to Switzerland, and I'm eager to get home. And my next trip will probably be around my other body of work, which is around dignity and unity, and that for me is a wonderful balance because when you see the underbelly of the criminal world, it's very scary and it's very dark and they're so organized. It's frightening, but I need to balance it out with the beauty. And I have the opportunity to, you know, sit at the feet of an elder sometimes in an indigenous community, and that gives me such grace, you know. So I'll probably be heading to Asia soon, perhaps back to Vietnam, but we'll see.
So thank you very much for the time and good luck. Could you please just also for the audience tell where they could see your work online or where it's exhibited? Excuse me for my English. Regular audience knows, but for the new ones, excuse it. Please give some information where we could find more information about you.
People can find my work at my website, which is simply my name, and it's Lisa Christine, and that's with a K, LISAKRISTINE. Please visit.
.com? .net?
Dot com. Thank you. Dot
Okay,
com.
sorry.
That's a good idea. And I have a lot of social media platforms too, which you could just Google my name. So
Thank you very much, Lisa. Have a good Davos.